Good morning, folks. This is Tuesday, December 10th, 2024. This is the Podman Community Ask Me Anything meeting, and it's 10 a.m. in the morning, not 11 a.m. as the slide is off a little bit here. So today, we've just recently announced the CNCF contribution that Podman, Scopio, Buildah, Bootc, Podman Desktop, and more are going through over the next few months. And so we decided to open up a session for questions from anybody and anyone to talk about that or anything else for that matter, container related. And Neil, you are the driver for this, so how do you want to start up on this? I know we had just talked a moment ago that questions and answers that people haven't sent in already, we're asking them to do within Google Meet. There's, if you look in the bottom right corner of your Google Meet, there's a triangle, square, and a circle there. If you click on that, you can get to a question and answer session. We appreciate questions there if you have any. And other than that,
okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
First of all, thanks for coming, everybody, and we're all very excited about our contribution. I'm Neil Smith. I'm a manager of container tools at Red Hat, and been working on putting together the package for us contributing to CNCF. And from our teams of Podman, we have a whole bunch of maintainers here, such as Nolan and Brent, and I think Matt is here and Paul is here, so a bunch of people. And we also from Bootc have Colin, and who else do you have here, Colin?
I did not invite my team. I probably should have. So just me.
So, okay, great. And
Valentin is here.
And okay. Oh yeah. Valentine's here. And we, from Podman Desktop, Tim's here, and we will be getting Stefan here to do some chatting as well. He's got a conflict for the first few minutes. And so we also have Mark Russell, who's our product manager for Podman Desktop and for Bootc. So first thing, I thought Mark could do a little summary on what is CNCF and part of our journey.
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, hi everybody, I'm Mark. I'm a product manager at Red Hat. I'll start off, we'll talk about kind of what the CNCF is, why we are moving towards contribution, and a little bit about the process. So the CNCF, as many of you know, it's part of the Linux Foundation. You can pull this right off the website, but it's founded to provide support, oversight, and direction for fast-moving cloud-native projects. There are 29 graduated projects. Shout out to Cryo, being in that group for a long time now. 36 incubating and 130 in the sandbox, approximately. What does it do literally? The CNCF does things like set certain standards on running a proper open source project. That varies by graduation, by steps on the ladder there. It does other things like host project infrastructure, share testing credits on cloud providers, and it provides wonderful opportunities to get the word out about your project, what's new. Partly by hosting KubeCons, which, by the way, are not just US and EU back and forth now. They're adding KubeCons in India and Tokyo. So there are going to be more and more events. But also symbolically, like other foundations, it pushes projects towards greater vendor neutrality and greater collaboration. So why in our case? Well, Podman's always been an open source project, developed with the community on GitHub. In fact, we've had at least one maintainer that I know of that was outside of Red Hat. And we've always listened to and many times prioritized features that came from the community. But getting to the why, I think there's two main reasons for us, and a third that I think is worth mentioning. We think it's the best way to grow our community engagement and encourage more contributions. Secondly, it's part of our kind of newly expanded container-centric view of infrastructure, from the application containers that everyone knows and loves and kind of dominate software development nowadays, to using Bootc to manage container images that describe your host disk, your operating system images. And we're doing that with the same tools and techniques. So we want the community to be able to count on absolutely first-rate free and open source tools to create these environments. The last one is, hey, look, I can stand here and I think most of the people, the maintainers in the room would agree that, like, you know, we don't think Red Hat's going to go anywhere or cease investment or be a bad steward of these tools. But now that's really a promise that everyone can count on regardless of commercial endeavors or what the future brings. I'm going to try to, hopefully I'm within my 5-minute cap still. I'll tell you. All right. So, and then a little bit about the process. So there is a lot of process to this. So the first thing is actually to get approval to enter the sandbox. The requirements are pretty straightforward. We're scheduling with tag runtime. So that's a technical advisory group. That gives a recommendation to the technical oversight committee that eventually votes. It's kind of like getting out of committee in some legislatures. We think that as a mature open source project, this should not be particularly difficult for us. It's really intended to make sure that you meet the basic criteria of being open source, being appropriate for the CNCF, and so forth. The sandbox makes a ton of sense for to spend some time in for newer projects like Bootc and ComposeFS. But for Podman, it makes sense for us to start looking towards incubation stage as soon as we get into sandbox, and that requires more work, a lot of work in license checking, all the way down your dependency trees. You have to decide the particulars and document clear project governance, including maintainer lifecycle, and a publicly updated list, a publicly documented list of adopters. And, you know, there's also all types of documentation about how you manage public meetings and so forth that we need to kind of bring together. So we'll be doing that in the next phase after we hope we get voted through into the sandbox. And I will turn it back over to Neil for some engineering talk.
Thanks. Great summary, Mark. So what I thought next would be nice would be a statement for, or some feedback from Brent, Colin, and Stefan's not here yet, so maybe Tim or DV, you could chat just about what are your thoughts about this CNCF contribution and what are you hoping to get out of it? So Colin, you want to start?
Yeah, of course. I mean, so I'm really excited about this. You know, like we said in the keynote talk, like I think to me this is home. It's where we should be. It's probably where we should have been from the start. And I'm really looking forward to, especially, yeah, containers at the heart, the technical heart of what we do. And I think just building connections with the other projects in the CNCF and being able to build on those resources, I think it's going to be a great move.
Thanks. Brent?
I suppose, speaking for Podman and Buildah, I think that it would be nice if we got contributors from more diverse locations, in the sense that it's almost all Red Hat right now. So we do have some helpers from Debian and others, but not just Linux distros, but if companies or single contributors out there start to pick up or feel more confident about contributions, then that would be nice for the Podman, Buildah, and tools teams. So it's not just about getting help; it's about getting help that sort of infuses some alternate thinking within the team, and perhaps sort of gives us a shot in the arm.
Awesome. Thanks. And Tim or DV?
Oh, okay. Can try to start. So I think that Podman Desktop was created from the start as basically a GUI that would be available on top of Podman. But one of the goals too was basically to help the developer transition from purely doing container to gradually move to Kube. And in general, Kubernetes is not a completely simple system. It has a lot of experience that you need to work on in order to get acquainted with it and so on. So one of the goals really from the start has been always to basically, okay, you want to play with container, we are gonna provide you Podman. If you want to use another container engine, that's fine too, no problem. But the goal is basically to help you also doing that transition toward Kubernetes. And smoothing the way, there is a number of plugins. The architecture is open. So really the idea when we go to the CNCF is trying to make sure that first, basically what we do is something that people are happy with. I mean, getting the feedback, that's key on running an open source project. And the other thing is also basically seeking contribution. Maybe there are things that we are doing that basically are not exactly what you need. Maybe you are using something specific and you would like to have a specific development, a specific plugin. Contribution welcome. I think that's really the intent. Let's make sure that we continue the progress of the uptake of a Podman desktop and help contributing back to the community, while at the same time getting that feedback loop, which gets everything rolling. So that's it, I think. Tim, do you agree? Anything else?
Yeah, I think Podman Desktop, clearly started with Podman, but it's always been about multiple container engines, Kubernetes, Bootc. There's lots of things you can do, and we've always been open. We've had some great contributions from the community, but this is a logical next step. Let's expand and make it clear that that's the direction we want. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, everyone. Next, let's do a quick 2025 roadmap for our projects and what we're planning. So, Colin, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So in a nutshell, there's kind of, I should clarify, Bootc is now a stable API. So we're committed to maintain the feature set we have. There's a lot of things that in the future, one that is under active contribution right now is an interactive progress, an API that allows higher level tools to view the progress of downloads and things like that. There's work on GUIs, deeper integration. ComposeFS, I am super excited about. We have continuing ongoing work on that. For those who know me, like around on-disk integrity, and another, so other random features like we've been just backfilling installer support. I think something I'm really proud of in the Bootc side is supporting cloud and bare metal in as uniform a mechanism as possible and integrating with installers. But the other big one I'd love to make progress on, and we have some contributions happening, is more cross-distribution support. There's a surprising amount of technical debt on the bootloader side. Someone showed up to work on Arch Linux, and there's just some grub patches missing, et cetera. Those are kind of what we're looking at right now. But obviously the roadmap can be dynamic. As people show up, we're happy to reshape and encourage contributions and build on what people want to see.
Great, thanks. Brent, what's up for Podman and Buildah?
I think we've got quite a bit, actually. We've got the inclusion of Z-Standard chunked and partial pulls slowly coming in. That will be, folks will start to see that in 1Q, 2Q, at least in Podman. Also in that time frame, we should start to see a new. Yes, I'll take the question on the fly.
Whoops. CL, you're on mute. Oh, there you go.
Yes, I have a question, a general one. The move to CNCF, how does that has an impact on the intensity Red Hat is investing on the container tools? I'm asking because I'm heavily testing RHEL 10 already and CentOS Stream 10. And I found out that Red Hat reduced the RPMs they provide for the new system. Something like Firefox, for example, Evolution, other desktop tools. And my concern is is the intensity of the developers like Brent or Tom or other guys, then will they have to reduce their responsibility, or will that not change?
Maybe I can take this. There's no change here, CL. I know
My
you
name
may
is
have.
Christian, by the way.
Oh, hi, Christian.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
It is
There's
my
no.
Google account that okay.
Gotcha. So
This
it is. There's no plan change in the investment on this team at all. I think you've probably seen some things that relate to desktop. Like you said, there's some changes that have happened with desktop, but Red Hat doesn't really push a. We have a workstation offering, but it's not a primary thing. We're mostly server class situations, so I wouldn't tie the two together at all.
Mhm. So, who is will Red Hat still be responsible for what happens with the container tools, even if it is donated to the CNCF?
That's
I mean,
a great question. We're going to deal with that soon, but Colin, did you want to answer this?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a step at it. I think what a lot of people want to see is Red Hat being a leader in a multi-vendor, a multi-stakeholder owned project. And, that's definitely what you're going to see. Like, just to emphasize with this, right? Like, we are, Bootc has been, for just on my side, right? And especially the Podman maintainers, like, there's years of work from all these people in these tools. So we're not, we're going to continue that, actually increase that. This is just a vehicle to increase that. Like, that's my point of view.
And if there are controversies, who has to decide what happens in the end? Is it still Red Hat?
That's another good question. I don't know. Matt, are you on yet? Maybe we can deal this.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Matt is working on, and maybe even George could answer this, but we will be putting together a governance policy for how to handle decisions and do things like that. And that's part of our CNCF process. We haven't done it yet, but we will be doing it, and that will tell you exactly how, if there's cross priorities, how you handle those, et cetera, and things like that. So, yep, that will be taken care of and be in a governance document.
Thank you. Because I think it's a very important part.
Yes. Yes.
Because I have to say, Podman, Buildah, Scopio, all those tools are absolutely amazing. They do their work, and together with the UBI provided by Red Hat, I'm running a lot of containers and everything works as expected. And I don't want to end in a situation like we had with Docker, for example. There's a policy changes the whole confidence we have in that.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting, like, anytime you go to a foundation, it raises questions about what the investment level is going to be. And for Red Hat, that is at least remaining constant. These are active projects. We are still, going to maintain and enhance them. But the reverse of that, the reason why we go to a foundation is because there are rules for governance, for, how decisions are being made. And to some degree, it even takes it out of the hands of Red Hat. We would, I worked for Red Hat only 4 years, but I've seen, the best intentions, the best open source, transparency about our projects. But this goes a step further and says that, we can't make any decisions based on what we want to do for Red Hat products or anything else. CNCF will ensure that the governance is followed. And over time, there'll be external contributors. It's even possible that, somebody else contributes enough that, it's a fully joint project, or even somebody else, has more votes than us. That's
I have a good example. I have a good example for what I'm asking, why I'm asking these things. Canonical has this LXD project, and there was an employee from Canonical. His name is Stephen Graber from Canada. And he did all the work for LXD project. And then Canonical decided to close it partly. And they fired him. And now it is a more or less closed source project, what I would call it. And my fear is that the same thing might happen here with the container tools as well.
So again, that's why you go to CNCF. Nobody can do that. It's an open project managed by a foundation.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay, I don't have any impact on that. It's just what comes to my mind when I saw the news.
Okay. Thank you, Christian. We still have to get some other things done, and we have lots of other questions.
One last thing I have. The Podman desktop, why don't you provide it as an RPM? Because I'm not a huge fan of Flatpak.
So
snaps and something like that.
I can explain that one very simple. I've been making RPM since the early time of RPM find, which I used to run. Thank you. So RPM is great when you have basically the source for everything that you build. Here, that's not the case. We are building on top of Electron, and Electron is an enormous beast.
I know.
I'm an RPM maintainer. I wouldn't want to maintain an Electron-based RPM, okay?
Okay.
It would take me just way too much. So yeah, there is only Flatpak at the moment. Flatpak is probably the simplest way for you to basically get the upgrade automatically. Use that. And sorry, as much as I love RPM, I'm not gonna do that. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. I'm using the command line anyway.
Okay, thanks, Christian. Brent, let's finish up your...
Yeah, and just a detail I'll throw in before I go back to the roadmap, Christian, is that Matt Heon is proposing a governance model that would be the same for Podman, Buildah, and Scopio. So we will not have differing governance models for, at least for our team's projects that we're responsible for. Okay, so back to the roadmap. I mentioned the Z standard chunked and partial pull. We'll see also in 1Q, we should see artifact support start to roll in for Podman as a tech preview kind of experimental feature. And build kit parity is always something that's on our mind and that we're looking at. And then we should see some significant work around our release processes coming to fruition in the first half, hopefully first quarter, but first half of next year, to make Podman and Friends releases significantly more smooth and reliable and automated. You're on mute, Neil.
Mute. Thanks. We had to have one of those, right? So, DD, Tim, what's up with Podman Desktop for 2025?
I can start if you want, Tim. So basically, I think that there is a number of things that we want to develop. So one thing with respect to Podman Desktop donation, the Podman Desktop comes with a number of plugins. Some of them are donated and are part of basically the roadmap that I will speak here. Some are not, okay? So that doesn't mean that we won't work on the others. On the other part, you can follow, but basically I'm giving a roadmap for the parts which are donated to CNCF, okay? So some of the things that we are gonna do are some improvement with respect to compatibility to Docker. That's something that had been basically put forward and so on. Where we can, we are gonna improve that. There is kind of a continuous burden to follow basically the extension. The people from the other people from Bootc, from Podman and so on, are basically putting new features and so on. The things evolve. We need to follow them. We need to provide them at the GUI level. We need to provide the full experience. that is part of the thing that we'll need to do. And from that point of view, that's just basically following the basically the locomotive and the early wagon of the train. So we are just behind and we need to follow. We don't have necessarily everything. There are things like, for example, SBOM generation when we do a build. There are things like basically multi-arch build, which are coming to or already came to Podman, but we don't have fully the support, which is sometimes a little bit harder when you're, say, you're on Mac OS and you need to generate an x86 64, making sure that everything is well done and well packaged, building all the containers. That will require a little bit more work, I think. Improvement, I think, on the logs, handling the log screens and things like that. We have now a number of extensions. They are all listed in the extension section of Podman Desktop, but having something online which is a little bit easier to basically use to, okay, select and pick and choose what you want to install locally is also part of the roadmap of what I would do. Improvement of the virtualization layer, which is one of the things that I do, so that you can start, for example, Unix shell directly or RHEL shell when we have RHEL, or being able to finish, for example, the Bootc layer. So you use the Bootc extension to generate an image. That image is built, and then you're in Podman Desktop, and you're looking for the button. Okay, no, let's run it. We don't have that yet, and we need to do that. So expect work to be done too at the lower layer of the virtualization to make things relatively easier. Tim, what else did I forget? Probably a bunch of things. Okay.
I think you've covered it well. Yeah, to me, there's still a ton of features in Podman itself in Bootc that we haven't exploited. We can improve access and usability. Kubernetes, there's still active work in, what else can we do to improve the flow, add features. DV and I just saw some demos of ideas on both of those. And then there's just like, Podman Desktop, even though we've been around for 2 years, there are still usability issues, bugs as we expand to, thousands of people that we need to fix. So even just the core, we're still improving.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Let's move on to questions. So our first question is there a transition period, and when is that anticipated for moving to CNCF? Mark, did you want to answer that one?
Is there a transition period? Well, I mean, there is an official decision point, right, where the technical oversight committee votes yay or nay, and that's when we officially enter the sandbox. But because the requirements are not, that's when you're in the sandbox. That's when the onboarding to get to the next level starts. So I don't think it's going to be one of these where we kind of pass the event horizon, celebrate a little bit, but we won't feel any differently. We can't go back, but we're. So I don't, we have time to then make the changes that that need to be made during that process. So I don't know what the timeline is like exactly. We're going to kind of feel it out as we go. There's a lot of work that involves the engineering team as well. And, we don't want that to dominate. We want our developers and, the team to be working on code. So we'll be balancing that. Sorry for kind of a non-answer, but it's we're learning.
I think it's a transparent answer. Thanks. We have a question from Warren. I was surprised to see Podman 5.2.2 appear in EL9.5. I assume the version upgrades were going to stop with 4.9x on the famous stability principle. I think this question for you, Matt. Is the intent to go rolling release on the Podman piece going forward?
Sure.
It's pretty muffly.
Okay. Testing. Any louder?
Okay, Brent, do you want to answer this? Because Matt.
I actually don't know the answer. I was going to ask one of our teammates to weigh in because Yeah, I was surprised to see it too.
So
Is Hendrik Lokesh perhaps?
I'm here, but I don't actually know. I guess maybe Tom or Derek.
No, I don't know.
okay. That seems like something we'll have to get back to you on, Warren. So
Let me see if I can dig out Hendrik.
okay, cool. Let's go to another question.
You're
There
muted,
we-
Neil.
Again. So this is for you, Colin. Mike Rockford had a question. The Bootc documentation mentions the plans of lifting the OS tree commit requirement in future. What kind of changes should be expected? Will they impact current available workflows? Will it be possible to transition existing systems? And will the Red Hat family of base images continue to use OS tree as their foundation? So 4-part question for you.
Yeah, I'll do this. I'll try and do this quickly in multiple parts to make sure we have time for other questions. Basically, the lifting of the requirement for the OS tree stuff in the container already landed. We made that kind of like a soft feature. There's a bigger picture. I'm going to try and write up stuff about this. That one kind of came out from making it easier to port other distributions. It just clearly makes it easier if you can just say from Arch Linux, install a kernel, install Bootc, install things and go and not have to think about OS tree. There's a little bit of that gets lost. Like SE Linux labeling is one of those things. We actually really do want it to happen at build time. And the profile integrity is also nice. Long story short, we'll kind of split into 2 modes, is where you can just kind of take any image that has a kernel in a compatible layout and that stuff, and Bootc will just do what needs to be done and boot it. But then the secondary path, this gets to the 4th part of your question. I see the future of how we manage versioned immutable file system trees is ComposeFS, because it gives us DM integrity like properties with the flexibility of files. And so OS tree has a checksum per file today. ComposeFS has one too. It's implemented at FSVary, and the kernel has a lot of nice properties. And so what we've already got a lot of good work on is producing what I call fully sealed images. So what you'll probably see going forwards is where we'll have ComposeFS integration for fully sealed container images. And that will apply both for Podman and Bootc. That was the 3rd part. The real answer, though, is so OS tree slowly kind of gets hollowed out, like that core, like how the files are managed goes to ComposeFS. But there's a lot of details there. There's bootloader handling. Again, people always ask, well, wait, how are containers bootable? And there's a lot there, right, around how we write bootloader entries, all this stuff that is in OS tree that isn't going to drop. And we're fully committed to supporting reliable transitions from existing OS tree systems. There's a lot of people that are using these. Again, it'll be a seamless in-place upgrade into this as we kind of hollow out that OS tree core and replace it with ComposeFS and containers.
Thanks. Hopefully that answered your question, Mike.
Neil, can we go back quickly to the EL
Sure.
RHEL 9.5? Warren, are you asking this question because you expected us to stay on Podman version 4 for the lifetime of RHEL 9? Is that kind of where you were going with this? Okay. So the release of 5.2.2 is, I just looked it up. It is intentional. We did want to release 5 on 9.4. That is acceptable to change major versions, assuming certain forward compatibility, backwards compatibility assumptions.
Okay.
And so that was intentful. RHEL 10 obviously will be 5.x plus.
Okay, thanks. Next question is actually for you, Brent. How will, with the move to CNCF, how will problems be reported to the project? Will they still be in GitHub, or will they come through Red Hat or CNCF? And is there any changes that will happen when we move to CNCF?
I don't think that CNCF changes anything on those terms, other than perhaps long-term, the location of our GitHub repository. That said, we today take issues from our Podman mailing list, our GitHub repos. We take them through the Red Hat bug reporting mechanisms. So the CNCF in that case doesn't, in my mind, change anything in terms of reporting problems, having conversations, how we behave. I'll just note that the Podman, Buildah, Scopio team and libraries, we've always had community meetings. That's another way for you to come ask questions about problems. All those things will continue onward by our team.
Awesome. Thanks. And Stefan, I got a question for you. What is the relationship between Podman and Podman Desktop?
So basically, when you are using Podman, you get a tool that you can use from the CLI. Podman Desktop is a graphical UI on top of Podman that is exposing all of the features and the capabilities of Podman, basically, and even more. So Podman Desktop focus a little bit on the application developer, enabling them to simplistically go from application to containers and then to Kubernetes. The relationship between the two projects is that we are working together to make those experiences and those workflows even more seamless and simple. And we are working together, meaning we have work that is getting done, that is getting aligned as well. That being said, Podman Desktop is also providing support for other container engines. We want the tool to be agnostic. Now we are focusing, at least from our end, we are focusing more our efforts on to better support the capabilities of Podman. There's a lot of things that Podman is doing that is making it very simple for people to run containers on production and to run them in a way which is consistent with Kubernetes. I am thinking about the native Kubernetes features of Podman, which I personally very much love, because maybe I have a bias, but I love them. And obviously, we are trying to make sure that the developers who are using Podman Desktop, they also are able to discover those capabilities. So we focus a lot on enabling the developers to more easily work with the containers, but also more easily work with Kubernetes. And I think you have with Podman, we have this middle ground solution that allows you to run Kubernetes workloads without having something that is as rich as Kubernetes. That can be this first stage or this first phase that allows a gradual experience moving towards Kubernetes.
Thank you. Next question is, Brent, I think you can answer this too, or anybody can. Is copyright assignment required?
Well, the devil's in the details, but is required to what?
I guess that would be to contribute.
I believe it is, but someone on the team can correct me on that one. This is not something I'm intimate with. I'm not quite sure what the question's getting at either.
Right. Mike. We can't hear you, Mike, if you're saying anything.
While he's trying to maybe unmute, I can maybe take a quick stab at this. I believe the answer is no. Like the CNCF requires sign off on commits, you know, that you are a valid author. It's just a explicit, but I think it's almost kind of a feature of CNCF, and maybe someone will correct me if I'm wrong, that this isn't, because it creates a multi-stakeholder environment and makes it, not doing copyright assignment makes it harder to change the license by one entity, right? Which is a feature, not a bug in this scenario, I believe. But again, like I'm not an expert in this, but that's my impression.
That's my take too from the history. I mean, CNCF is a Linux Foundation, and Linux has always been that way. So that's it.
And we don't have a CLA, right? We don't have a contributor agreement, so we don't require assignment. We haven't, so.
Yep.
Okay. The next question is, how can I, as a contributor, become a maintainer in the governing body?
Is that to me?
Well, it was for Matt, but he can't talk because he's got computer voice.
The aforementioned governance model will outline exactly how this all will work. But in general, and this is probably the case in all open source projects, projects like to see some contributions from folks, and that work is looked at and evaluated, and assuming that that relationship sort of matures. In other words, we're getting good contributions, or the contributions are work together as a team. Assuming that kind of goes well, then perhaps the contributor would like to be a maintainer, or the group invites them to consider being a maintainer. And the governance model will explain exactly how that all will work. There's probably not a lot of sense of going into it, but that's the general approach, I think, for most open source projects. And we would be more or less the same, just now having a model that says exactly how to do that, as opposed to a little less gray matter there.
Right. Thanks. DV.
I think that basically the governance model is, as put forth by the CNCF and requested, is really to ensure fair access to maintainership. And I think the fairness is really the base of what drives the governance model. So I would assure that, yes, anybody who contributes as much as someone safe who is already a contributor at Red Hat should get that access definitely. Otherwise, the process is broken. That would be wrong.
And I would throw in, like, I think one thing that they, you know, that's it's unspoken, it's fairly spoken, right? It's like you can't have a pattern of rejecting patches from other entities just for commercial reasons or anything related to that, right? Things need to be evaluated fairly. And patches don't have to always be accepted. They can be rejected as out of scope. They can be bad form. They might need work. But it should never be like, well, you're enabling some commercial use case for a competitor, and we don't want to see that. Like that, we never did that, but this is to kind of make that quite clear.
Thank you. Okay, we have a question from Christian. Will it be possible to create Bootc containers for deploying traditional systems with standard partitions rather than immutable systems based on OS tree?
This is a great question. So I love this one because, you know, when Solomon Hykes kicked off this all more than, a long time ago now, you know, I like to say, like, Docker was the simplest thing that could possibly work. Like basically just tar wrapped with JSON. And then to your point, when you Docker run something, and then today when you Podman run something, what you get is a single writable overlay FS that by default, well, it may or may not persist across reboot, right? And that's actually really interesting, right? And now you can, of course, tell Podman, please mount my file system read-only. And it's actually a really good idea to do this because it avoids leaking space. But it does, as a consequence, mean you can't just, Podman exec into the pod and type DNF upgrade, right? That breaks. When we debated exactly what you're asking in all this, because it would clearly increase ergonomics and alignment in some cases if we could tell the story that how a Bootc system works is literally the same way Docker and Podman run a container by default, in that you have a transient writable root. But the thing is, I think when you go to the base operating system, it becomes a giant trap because too many people expect writing files to persist across upgrades. And that was the number one argument why we didn't go this route. But could we enable what you're talking about? Absolutely. My answer is today, we actually support configuring Bootc to have a transient writable / by default. It's in the docs. If you want to do that, you can. And it's actually a pattern that for some users and customers, I think it can make a lot of sense, where you're mostly image-based, but you have a little bit of config management that runs on each boot and reconciles state. Maybe it installs a couple packages on each boot. You can do that with that transient writable root. And I think that gives you 90% of what you're talking about but you can still shift to a more immutable system. Like, I think the non-Bootc but installed via container and then upgraded is just this kind of weird intermediate step that it isn't worth enabling that versus just saying you can do a Bootc system and just enable the transient root if that's what you want.
Thank you. Question for Paul, if you're around. What do you find the most challenging part to maintain in the Podman project?
Good question. The most challenging part, user expectations, because they always do things you don't expect them to.
Cool. Thank you. And this is for Brent, Stefan, DV, Colin. What are the big challenges you're seeing coming up in the CNCF journey?
I guess I'll take a quick stab. Well, maybe we should raise hands. I think the GitHub repo transitional seems like it might be a little bit painful, but I don't know. I know there's tools for this. But honestly, just beyond that, I think Fizz will just be a one-time thing, and I'm really looking forward to, going to the next KubeCons and talking with the different other project maintainers there and collaborating on all the different things we built together.
DV, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I would say as a manager, one of my worries is gonna be, when will I get the budget to actually send the guys to all the Cube events where they should go? And I see that the other managers in the room have exactly the same. That's actually one of the things. Are we gonna really be able to commit to the level of community engagement? Not because we are not gonna do the source or not gonna review your patches or so on, but are we gonna be able to enable that communication without having to pay for travel, that budget that we don't have? So I would say one of the things is basically is going to be how much can we enable basically discussion in the community while knowing that we won't be able to do an enormous amount of travel. That may be actually from my side one of the main worries right now. Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Brent?
Yeah, I would generally agree with Colin that the repo switch is something that's looking like a big hurdle. Reality may in fact be different. What's not a big hurdle and is reality is, at least for our project, is we have a very complex continuous integration CI/CD system. And moving that with all that that entails, which is cost, we test on Mac, Windows, Linux, VMs, bare nodes, all of that. That's a heavy lift. And it's not something we're looking at doing immediately, so it's not something we'll stop working on Podman to do that. But that's all kind of part of the same big lift for us. And then the other thing I would just add is sort of the CNCF application process is work, and projecting that work with engineering work is something that we'll have to kind of keep an eye on, so that we're still satisfying what users want, existing and new, and taking care of our foundational work as well.
Preeti, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I would agree with DV in a lot of what he said, and I would take it to another level, saying that keeping up with the project VS versus the product commitments that we have for Red Hat releases, and keeping up with the CNCF and project commitments, and that would be a challenge, and that's probably something that I would have to think a lot about.
Stefan.
Yeah, I believe all of this is bringing a lot of opportunities that we are all very excited about. The challenge is how we are going to leverage all of them for the best of the project and for the community. That's at the moment a little bit my concern, but I'm also very excited because I know those opportunities are looking very, very promising. We have already been hearing from a couple of people in the community, and that's awesome. We are definitely looking for joining forces and make those projects becoming central places for the innovation on containers technologies. So opportunities and making sure that we are able to leverage them is probably the biggest challenges ahead of us.
Oh, that's a sort of good problem to have. Well, it is a good problem. Okay, and Brent touched on, I think a couple of people touched on moving repositories. There's a high probability that we do have to move repositories. The answer is not known for sure yet. And when we do, we will try to minimize disruption when we go and do that, for both CI reasons and being nice reasons. And I think this is a good next question. If the teams were looking for community help in specific areas, what would those be in? But where do you need help right now? So everybody can put their hands up. Brent.
I would love to jump on this, and I would say anything Windows related to Podman, we just need, we've got people that know things, but it's just so broad and it's changing. So anything Windows, someone could get on our good side very quickly, helping with that. Not to mention that most of us are Linux propeller heads. So anything Windows, Mac OS kind of falls in the same category. It's just a lot less broad.
Thanks. Colin, DV?
Sure, I'll take a quick stab at it. I mean, obviously, a whole lot depends on your skills. I think, one thing is, we can use people from deep Linux systems expertise, like we have people showing up working on bootloaders and things like that, which is great. But, a lot of times it just falls to the project maintainers to do issue triage, or so if just one person showed up and maybe tried to answer questions or bug reports other people had, and maybe with their experience, that would be awesome. It's just, that's a thing that's just so wonderful, right? When someone just shows up to help, even in small things like that. So for us, it's really across the board, but those are two examples that span that spectrum.
Thanks. And DV, go for it.
I would say that in general, from a Podman desktop point of view, like any of complex application, it's difficult to QE every single aspect of the UI, the interaction, things that don't work, and so on. So there is part of the telemetry. There is, for example, a feedback form that comes back. Raise issue when you see them. Even better, instead you feel a bug, help us, we take patch. Basically, other things that people can do in the community, which are not code related, look at our doc, tell us basically, oh, I was trying to do blah, but I didn't find the explanation. Maybe the explanation is somewhere, it's just hidden, it's not well indexed. Maybe basically the feature was missing or is incomplete. Basically, and we don't necessarily need to add patches. The last thing I would say is that there is a generic community kind of spirit. I remember myself the early days of the Linux in the beginning of the 90s when we were doing install parties and so on. But there is something to the open source side, which is really about how do we share the knowledge, how do we help each other? And being part of the community is doing that too. It's not just going into GitHub and feeling bug. That's still a very, very good thing to do. Please do it. But also work basically the knowledge around you. One of the reasons we go to CNCF is to be able to enable that and basically balloon it, mushroom it. So that's it. There is so many things that you could do to help us. Okay.
Yes, and same. I want to reiterate that. Like, we hope you will join our community. We think we're nice people, and we think we have fun, and we would love to have you come and do that with us. So that'd be great. We have one last question. We're almost out of time. How does this transient root layer compare to RPM OS tree's layered packages? Is this just providing a similar technology to non-commit based operating systems? That's for you, Colin.
I'm going to try and do this in 20 seconds, but it's totally different. So the RPM OS tree, a whole lot of work went into that package layering. You know, it's really intended to like provide that hybrid image package system. We never tried to do anything around that, or Podman and Docker. So basically they're independent things. The layer package is persistent. What we're talking about here is, again, creating a much simpler model for Linux system administrators in the future, where the base OS comes as a container. It should work the same way Podman and Docker run pods. So the layer packages may come in on the DNF side, or maybe a future apt or other package systems that might learn how to basically do a local container build and help you merge for your across upgrades.
Cool. Okay, well, we're out of time. Thanks everybody for coming. I thought it went really well, and maybe we can do it again. If you ask for it, I'm sure we can do it again.
Yeah.
Tom, you got anything you want to say before?
No, nothing else other than thanks all for coming here. And I too would love to see this maybe a quarterly or every 6 months or so, especially now with the CNCF transition going on. I think it'd be helpful to have some more of these in a little shorter cycle, perhaps in February. So
good idea. I would appreciate it.
Yes.
And thanks a lot for the invite.
Right. I am going to stop the recording now, and thank you all.
Have a great day, everyone.